blinkers on.
Yeah, but the recorder on the, I mean
On the VCR?
you have to have that on now?
No.
Oh, you don't? Oh, okay.
We were talking about the situation you were all in the Depression. You were talking about the what you call the dole for those of us who were born.
A little bit later?
Or for those who were born after 1950, the dole, of course, is like a welfare system.
Yeah, that was the welfare system. And the effort then was to try and put people to work somehow. Incidentally, what's the date today?
Today is
25th.
the 25th of October, 1991.
91, yeah. So that was about 50 years ago.
No, more than that, about
Yeah.
31,
The 55
60
years.
years ago.
Whenever there were a lot of people, a lot of jobs that the city had that were, well, I guess they'd call them common labor. Those were always given to people on welfare, as it was called. And after their first check, well, usually they only got 1 or 2 weeks of work, and then they'd be off for 6 weeks, 2 months, and then they'd come back. In the street department, my department, once you became a driver, you had a full-time job, because you were responsible then for the truck. But your helper was always somebody from on welfare. And I met a lot of interesting people that lived different lives than what I did. Some of them were crumbs, and others were lazy, others were intelligent, and very interesting, because you had to drive back and forth to the jobs and stuff. So you got to know them. Then you ate dinner with them. Everybody carried his lunch then. I think every job I ever had was interesting. Met different kinds of people. Even the volunteer jobs, I enjoyed all of them. So, anyway, I think we left off with the...
Well, we were trying to get a picture of what life was like in the Depression years for you, and
When did Roosevelt create the CC camps?
Well, we were still in high school then. Yeah, the Civilian Conservation Corps.
Yeah.
did you ever work on that?
No. But a friend of mine, Norm Gabeski, did. And I communicated with him. We used to write letters. He was in the Upper Peninsula at Nagani, Civilian Conservation Corps camp up there. They were working in the woods. They made trails. Fire trails were a big thing for them at the time. State parks, they used to make parking lots in them. Many of those parking lots, they still have the borders, the timber. They cut the trees down, and those trees then were used for bumpers around the around the perimeter of the parking lot. And there's many of those parking lots still have them. There used to be a camp in the Bay City State Park.
Yeah.
Those were all veterans of the First World War. And
Well, just so everybody will know now, the CCC camps were, or the whole CCC organization was very much like the military, wasn't it? It was almost like
Yeah,
a cross between the Boy Scouts and the military, and it was for older boys.
they were a work camp, but it was run on military lines.
They lived in tents, didn't they, a lot of the time?
Yes. Hmm.
Army tents?
And, yeah.
War Army uniforms?
Tents. Yes, they had khaki uniforms that they wore. They got a wage, which was which part of it, major part of it, was supposed to be sent back to their families. In order to enlist in the CCCs, you had to be on welfare or close to it, unemployed. The father had to be unemployed. And it was a program initially for youths, what we would today call dropouts, or high school graduates without jobs.
What age group are we talking about?
Late teens. Well, say from 17 to 21, 22.
So about the same age you'd be if you went in the Army.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. The bosses were all military personnel assigned to that duty. They ran the camps, and there were some civilian bosses who had the skills necessary for the particular jobs that the boys were doing. Now, the veterans got into it because their lobby said, well, you're hiring these kids, why not hire some of the veterans? They were all bachelor veterans. None of them had families. They were either never married, or they were divorced, or single widowers. There were no men with children in that project. But it was good for them. They did work that because they had skills that the boys didn't have, that they were able to use. Heck, some of the other things.
Well, this was all part of Roosevelt's big recovery act
Yeah.
in the NRA.
Yeah.
Right.
Roosevelt got a lot of criticism, and justly so. He was egotist, and personally, I'm not too sure, but about the World War II years, before and after. But he was president, and he did the job that he set out to do. But he had a vision that I don't think many presidents have. And he had a respect for people. And I think that was the reason that I mentioned before about the jobs that were all manual. Sure, they could have brought in cranes and diggers. But how many men would that have put to work? Just the guys that made the machine, and they'd be done. And then the operator and a couple of truck drivers on some of these bigger jobs. But by using manual labor, all these men were employed. They had some dignity because they were working. And also they kept the, what do they call that? Where you get up to work, get up every morning and you go off to work and then you come back home. Instead of going down to the welfare office and picking up your check and then coming home and sitting on your butt. That was good. I give him a lot of credit for that one.
The only thing I disliked him for is because there were a lot of rumors, I don't know how true they were, that he had broken the code with the
He knew Pearl Harbor was coming,
right.
and he let it come. I've heard that.
That's a matter of history now.
Well, by a matter of history, I mean you feel it's true and documented?
Oh yes, yeah. Well, that's been documented.
That he knew it was coming?
Yes,
And could have warned them?
yeah. They neglected to do so because he wanted an incident that would bring the United States into the war with Britain.
Well, we were in the war with Britain then.
No, we weren't. We were supplying them. We had the Lend-Lease program.
But we had sent soldiers over.
Not.
To Europe we had.
No, we hadn't declared war until after Pearl Harbor. In fact, that's one of the questions that I had. At the time, of course we're getting away from the Depression here, but at the time of Pearl Harbor, and just prior to Pearl Harbor, wasn't it true that the country was really divided about whether or not to get into the war?
Yeah.
In fact, it was a very hot political issue, and the kind of issue that influences elections.
We had the Lend-Lease. We were leasing warships to Britain, and they were supposed to, on paper, they were supposed to be returned to the United States after Britain got through using them, which was a way of providing them with armaments. I think we did some planes at bombers and so on and so forth. But we didn't get into that seriously until we went into the war. The soldiers that we had over there was a lot of Americans that enlisted in the Canadian Army, and some directly into the British services. Those men went overseas, but they weren't a part of the United States Army.
Bill Fehrenbach was. He was right in England.
During the war, yeah. The 8th Air Force.
And so was Kelly Davis. He was in Europe, and
so was I. But it was after the war started.
I think the point of departure is when all this took place. Was it before Pearl Harbor or after Pearl Harbor?
I thought it was before, because because we were into the war in Europe then, and some of our soldiers came back. Kelly Davis was one of them. They brought him from Europe and sent him over the other way.
After peace in Europe.
No. Before BJD. Kelly went in the South Pacific before that.
Well, in the time between when the Germans surrendered, or just after the Germans surrendered, a lot of American troops were sent from Europe, from the European theater, over to the Pacific theater because the war was still going on in the Pacific.
Yeah, right.
But the time we're talking about is prior to, like, 1941, prior to Pearl Harbor. But anyway, getting back to the Depression, the impression that I'm getting from you is that life was very difficult, but there were options. I mean, you didn't have to just give up. You didn't have to just sit home. Thank God there was no television back there then, and everybody would have sat and watched television.
See, everybody was out of it. I think the employment was at least 25%. But also, in that depression, prices kept going down and down and down and down for the goods you had to purchase. Whereas this last one, or the one we're in right now, prices keep going up. That was the big difference. So that anything you bought, well, if you could scrape pennies, you could buy something.
Yeah,
But it was possible to just get out and hustle and make a buck here and a buck there. And
Well, well, no, and not too easily, because there weren't jobs. I know every time there was a opening or a few openings at the General Motors plant, the Chevrolet plant in Bay City, they didn't have to put it in the paper. Word got around, and the next morning at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, there'd be a lineup outside the Chevrolet building waiting for the employment office to open up. And the guys would be lined up there, a couple blocks, and the employment, what do they call him? Anyway,
Personnel.
the guy that does the hiring.
personnel manager.
Personnel man, he'd just come out and go down the line, and if he saw, as he saw them in, dang, those guys were, hi, Joe, or Mr. So-and-so, or getting his attention. But then he'd pick and choose what men were going to be hired that day, and if he didn't have any people he knew, well, then he'd go up to the headline and take a few off the front, the ones that had been waiting the longest. And in many cases, they'd pick out in that line the younger, bigger, stronger men and bypass the older men, the family men that really needed the job.
Well, it was rough when the banks closed too. I mean, like, there was a boy with us in high school. His dad ran the bank in Essexville, and those banks were closed right away.
Did they fail, or they just closed them down?
Every bank in the country was closed down for 10 days, wasn't it?
And some of them failed.
Yeah, well, it was an effort to stop the runs on the banks. People were withdrawing their money, and Roosevelt and his advisors felt that we'd have panic in the streets.
Which they did on Wall Street.
Oh, yeah, well, that was the stock market crash.
Yeah.
So they closed the bank for, I believe it was 10 days, to get reorganized and have a breather.
Was this a government order?
Yeah.
Close all the banks?
And it made it hard. People that, well, after you spent the money you had in the house, well, you didn't have any money. So some of the cities did resort to scrip. That was not necessarily during those 10 days, but during the Depression, you could pay, when you worked for the city or county, you were paid in scrip, and you could then use that to pay for your taxes. The money circulated, and that way, work got done, taxes got paid, but there wasn't a penny of real money spent.
A script, for those who don't know it, is like money that's printed by somebody other than the government.
Almost like a check that couldn't be cashed anyplace else but back in the city.
Wow, what were things like down in banks? What was it like for you during those
Well, not too bad, because my dad was never out of a job.
He worked for
he was
Robert
running
Gage.
the Robert Gage Coal Company on Water Street then. By that time.
He was manager. He didn't own it.
Oh no.
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 Now, where did you live exactly when you were? Did you live on Keystone Street?
Yeah. Keystone and Elm.
So is that pretty much your homestead?
Yeah, I'd say so because we were living on 4th Street when my mother died. You know.
Well, you were actually living on the east side then.
Yeah. And then my grandfather Baumgarten took us for a little while, and then in March of that year he left and went back to Germany. So we went down to my grandparent Harry's, you know, to live. And when he came back, we didn't want to go back. So really,
You didn't like Grandpa Baumgarten?
we liked him, but it was more home down because my dad's sister lived just about a block away, and they had 3 or 4 children, and you know we got to know the neighborhood better, and
Oh, I see.
and we enjoyed it more because my grandfather Baumgarten lived on the east side and kind of in a snooty area.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't have that much money or anything, but
Now, did he live on 6th Street?
yeah. Well, when we went to live with him, he lived on Center Street in a big house. I don't know if he rented it. I don't think he owned it at the time.
You remember where that was?
Yeah, it's on Center and what's kind of in the middle of the block between Johnson and something else.
Trumbull?
Yeah, maybe that's.
East of Johnson?
Yeah.
There were some pretty ritzy
Yeah.
homes in that
Yeah.
neighborhood.
Yeah. And then where he lived on 6th Street was a pretty nice area. But we just were happier down in Banks to live. So I lived there from the time I was 5 years old until I got married. Well, we went to live with my dad 1 year after he got married the second time, and but still wasn't home.
Was that on Kiesel? The house on Kiesel?
Yeah.
200 block?
He lived on Clara Street for a little while up on the east side, on the west side,
Yeah.
and then they bought the house on Kiesel.
I remember that house. I remember visiting that house.
Yeah,
And I remember the one on Keystone, of course. We were in that quite a bit.
yeah. Well, like I say, that was more home to me than any place.
Uh-huh.
So,
Well, there was just you and Mary Florance in your family at the time.
right. When my mother died, yeah.
Okay. Let's kind of work our way back through your family a little bit, starting from you. Do a little family tree if we can. Your father was William Herrick, is that
Right,
William, what was his middle name?
Nicholas.
Nicholas. Where was he born?
In Bay City.
In Bay City. And your mother?
Well, my mother was born in Bay City too. They lived on, I don't know where they lived when she was born.
What was her name?
Agatha Baumgarten.
Baumgarten?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, do you remember your father's parents' name?
My father's?
Yeah.
Oh, sure. Louis, Herrick. I don't think he had any middle name. And my grandmother's name was Mary Louise. Her maiden name was Morin, M-O-R-I-N.
And are they both from Bay City?
No, they weren't born in Bay City.
Do you know where they were born?
I'm not sure about my grandfather. I don't know if he was born in Canada. I think my grandmother was born in Canada.
Well, is that where they were married and then moved to Bay City? They came from Canada?
No, the family came from Canada. For my grandmother's family came from Canada, and they moved into Bay City. And do you know where the Banks Hardware is right now?
Uh-huh.
That was a big rooming house. They had 12 bedrooms upstairs. They were just a bed and there was no complete bath, I don't think, at the time. And they took in boarders, and one side of it was a saloon downstairs.
Now, this would have been the lumbering period.
Yeah, oh yeah.
So they served drinks to the lumberjacks and,
Oh, yeah.
and mill workers.
Yeah,
All those nice fellas.
right.
But you don't know where Lewis Herrick came from, other than
I don't know if it was from Canada or I remember my grandmother accusing him of being a German because his family came from Alsace-Lorraine. At one time it belonged to France, and another time it belonged to Germany. So, but he always said he was French.
Well, Herrick is a French name, isn't it?
Right.
Well, do you remember your mother Agatha's parents?
Well, her father, but her mother died when she was about 13, 14 years old.
Okay, who was her father?
I can't think of his first name. Isn't that terrible? Charlie Bumgard.
Now, when we were growing up, we heard the name Papa Bumgarden. Is that who
That's
that
the
was?
guy. Yeah, he was my grandfather on my mother's side.
Well, you better. Also, your Papa Herrick was Papa.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Papa Bumgarden was
Yeah,
was this
right.
person. Okay.
So there was two Papa
Right.
Yeah.
grandfathers.
Yeah.
We never called him Grandma and Grandpa.
Yeah.
Any of them. I don't know why.
Okay. Do you remember your grandmother's name? Agatha's mother's name?
No, I don't.
No? Okay.
He married again, and her name was Ida. Ida May, I think her name was.
Okay, but that's not in your line. Ida is not in your line.
Lineage, no.
No,
Okay.
no.
Okay, now we used to hear a lot of other names from banks, and I was never able to put them in a
Picture.
in a structure of any kind. Who was Aunt Zeus?
She was my dad's sister,
And she was married to who?
Archie Clemens.
And Sue's was Una Marie.
Yeah, her right name was Una Marie, yeah.
UNA?
Mm-hmm.
Where did she get the name Zoos? Is that Z-O-O-S?
I don't know. I don't
Just whatever name you
Yeah,
It was never
I-
written,
I
it was
didn't-
always spoken.
Right.
Was that some mispronunciation of a name or something that the kids picked
They
up
gave
on?
all their kids crazy nicknames. I
Oh.
don't know.
Oh, okay. And then she was William's sister. Huh?
Yeah. And Aunt Ben was
Wait a minute. Now, who did Aunt Zeus marry?
Archie Clemens.
Archie Clemens. Okay. And then Ben.
Was Genevieve.